My name is Walter Peterson. I'm 62 years old, a widower for the past 7 years. I live in the old house my parents left me in a neighborhood near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The house isn't large, but it's packed with memories. Its cracked walls here and there hold countless stories of the past that no one but me can tell. I used to work as a construction site foreman. Now, I live off my small pension and by helping neighbors fix leaky roofs or broken fences. My hands are still strong, even if wrinkles are starting to grace the skin that was once rugged. My wife, Mary, died from uterine cancer. She was a patient woman, the glue that held our family together, and she adored home cooking. Every Sunday, this house would be filled with the aroma of spices and warm laughter. Now, all that remains is an echoing silence that sometimes makes me long for the voices of the past. My only son, Michael, is now 35. He managed to earn a degree in civil engineering from a respected state university, thanks to the hard work of both Mary and me. We scrimped and saved every penny so our son could get a good education. And he was smart, always at the top of his class. Mary was so proud of him. "Walter, our boy is going to be a success," Mary used to say when we sat on the porch, counting the savings for his next semester. But ever since he married Tiffany, a girl from a wealthy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, Michael started coming home less and less. Our relationship grew distant, not just physically, but emotionally too. The weekly phone calls are now sporadic, only happening around Thanksgiving or Christmas. Michael and Tiffany live in an exclusive, upscale community near northern New Jersey. They have a 2-story modern house with a backyard and an open-plan kitchen. It's a beautiful house they bought with a mortgage. I paid the initial down payment in full. Without a second thought, I pulled out my retirement savings to help them start their new life. From the beginning of their marriage, they relied heavily on my help. The kitchen renovation cost $10,000. They bought a custom kitchen set and a side-by-side refrigerator. The monthly mortgage payment was $2,500 for over 5 years. I never kept track because I thought, why should a father count what he gives his own son? Late one Tuesday afternoon, December 10th, I visited Michael's house with good intentions, bringing a simple gift: homemade molasses cookies, a fancy cheese spread, and an envelope with some cash for my grandson, whom I hadn't seen since he was a baby. Tiffany opened the door, offering a tight smile, and let me into the living room, where I sat on a plush gray sofa. Everything looked new and expensive. My old eyes scanned the room, trying to find a family photo. I hoped to see my face among the frames on the wall. But there were none. "Michael, your dad's here," Tiffany called toward the back of the house. Michael emerged from his home office, looking awkward when he saw me. "You didn't say you were coming, Dad," he said quietly, giving me a quick hug. I tried to lighten the mood. "I was just thinking, why don't we have Christmas dinner at your place this year? I could make your mother's old recipe for pot roast and gravy, the one you always loved as a kid." Michael looked uncomfortable, quickly glancing toward the kitchen where Tiffany stood silently, rolling up her sleeves. A strange silence hung in the room, as if my words had just dropped a heavy weight onto their shoulders. Michael replied with a sentence that sounded rehearsed. "Ah, I'm sorry, Dad. Maybe it's better if you don't come this Christmas. Tiffany's parents from New York will be staying, and they have certain standards for the atmosphere." The living room fell silent again, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock, one I remembered buying for them when they first moved in. My chest felt tight. I asked softly, still trying to understand, "Do I not meet the standard to sit at your dining table, son?" Tiffany walked into the living room with a thin, sweet smile. "It's not that, Walter. But if you come, the atmosphere will be different. My father enjoys discussing literature and global finance, not construction site stories." Those words pierced me deeply. I remembered seeing a social media post from Tiffany one day: "Family isn't about who gave birth to you, it's about who knows how to dress for the dining table." Since they bought the house, Michael had never invited me to any family gatherings. Not even my grandson's birthday. I only saw their happy, smiling photos on Facebook, without my presence. As I was leaving, I stood up and walked past the family photo shelf. In every frame, my face became smaller and finally disappeared altogether about 4 years ago. It was as if my existence in this family had been slowly erased. I stood at the door, my hand trembling on the knob, and said without turning around, "Please send my regards to Tiffany's parents. And enjoy your Christmas with your new standards." As the door closed slowly behind me, I heard Tiffany whisper to Michael, loud enough for me to hear, "Walter is a good man, but he's just too traditional to be allowed in our family photos." My steps were heavy as I walked to the old car parked out front. It started to rain, masking the tears that I hadn't realized were running down my old cheeks. There's a point where loyalty turns into foolishness, when all the evidence of your kindness is only noted as a burden. That night, the rain continued to fall heavily. I drove slowly down the winding road toward Pittsburgh, back to my quiet old house. This old car remained loyal, unlike some people who change when their lives do. The radio played a classic country song Mary and I Used to Love, The Dance, by Garth Brooks, filling the car cabin and making my chest tighten further. I remembered how Mary and I would often sing along, twirling little Michael in the living room. "Walter, our Michael is going to be a good man, isn't he?" Mary whispered one night as we tucked him into bed. "Of course, dear. We'll raise him with love," I answered, full of certainty. Where was that love now? Can love be traded for a price, like a commodity? When I got home, I hung up my wet jacket, put the kettle on for a cup of tea, and sat down in front of the plastic shelf holding my financial documents. For some reason, tonight I felt compelled to see exactly how much I had given my son. I opened the old laptop Michael had given me after he graduated. How ironic, I thought. This thing has lasted, but our relationship has fractured. In the folder labeled, Michael and Tiffany, dozens of Excel files and PDF transfer receipts were stored. I started opening them one by one, looking at the numbers I had never bothered to tally. The regular transfers of $2,500 per month for 61 months. The total came to $152,500. That wasn't including the $3,000 for the fence renovation, the $5,000 for the new TV they got for Christmas one year, and the $4,000 for my grandson's preschool tuition. I stared out the window at the continuing rain. This isn't charity, I mumbled to myself. This is enablement. There's nothing wrong with helping your child. But when that help becomes an unspoken obligation, and gratitude is replaced by shame for having you, is it still called love? I got up and began to print every single transfer record. Page after page came out of the old printer, stacking up like the layers of memories I had stored away. My hands trembled as I put all the papers into a blue folder, Mary's favorite color. With the folder in hand, I walked out to the backyard. The rain had stopped, leaving behind wet earth and the calming scent of petrichor. Near the apple tree Mary planted 20 years ago, I lit a match. I burned the transfer receipts, one by one. The fire consumed the papers, but not the regret. This was a liberation from the false hope that Michael would one day appreciate me as a father, not just a funding source. "Mary," I whispered to the night air, "our son is all grown up. Maybe too grown up, that he's forgotten where he came from." The next morning, while patching a leak on a neighbor's roof, my phone rang. Tiffany's name flashed on the screen. It had been nearly a year since she'd called for anything other than money. I answered, and Tiffany immediately spoke fast, without a greeting. "Walter, could you pick up my parents at Newark Liberty Airport? They land at 1:30 p.m. Can you use your car, please?" There was a brief pause before I answered simply. "I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not the family chauffeur." Tiffany went silent for a moment, clearly shocked by my reply. I had always said yes to every request. Her voice then became softer, manipulative, as it usually did when she wanted something. "Walter, don't be like that. This isn't a small thing. My parents are very influential people. They can't just take any taxi off the street." I smiled bitterly. Influential people who have never invited me to their family events. Influential people whose daughter married my son but have never once sat at the same table as me. "I apologize, but I'm fixing a neighbor's roof leak today," I answered calmly. Tiffany added, her voice starting to sound frustrated. "You know my father is very conscious of his image. We can't let him be embarrassed in front of them. Like that time at the grandson's birthday party, you showed up in flip-flops." The word stung, but I remained silent. My face hardened, but my eyes began to water. Flip-flops. Yes, I wore flip-flops to my grandson's birthday. The same flip-flops I wore while working day and night to pay for Michael's college. The same ones I wore walking to the bank every month to wire money for their luxurious mortgage payment. Tiffany continued in a sweet but sharp tone. Walter Peterson is like an auto debit, as long as it works, we accept it. But if it stops, maybe it's time to replace it. I didn't reply. My gaze was fixed on the Pittsburgh sky, which was starting to cloud over again. Without a word, I ended the call and climbed down from the roof. Inside the house, I powered off my phone and unplugged the landline. Today, I wanted to be alone. Today, I stopped being the auto debit. I sat in the living room, turned on the old radio, and wrote down Tiffany's words in the small notebook I always carry. I am not a debit. I am the parent you ashamed. At 1:15 p.m., I imagined two elderly people standing in the light drizzle at Newark Airport. Luggage piled on a cart. Influential people who won't take a street taxi. People whose daughter has taught my son to be ashamed of having a father like me. Meanwhile, in the small house near Pittsburgh, I started brewing tea and making a plan. Because after years of giving everything without conditions, I realized that sometimes love that gives too much can kill one's self-respect. And today, I chose to bring my self-respect back to life. I sat on my porch, gazing at Mary's photo on the wall. "Honey," I whispered softly, "am I wrong to want to be respected as a father, not just a walking bank account?" The rain began again. I went inside, grabbed my bank book, and opened it. Only a small amount was left of my pension savings. Over the years, nearly all of it had gone to Michael and Tiffany, for their beautiful house, their luxurious lifestyle, for the very dining table that apparently had no chair for me. My phone rang again. Michael this time. I chose not to answer. Let him feel what it's like to have his call go unanswered, to have his presence deemed unimportant. That night, I made a decision. A lot of things were going to change from now on. I was no longer the automatic debit, always available. I was a father who still had self-respect to maintain. "Mary," I whispered to my wife's picture. "Forgive me if this isn't how you would want it, but I have to do this, for our Michael, too." The phone rang for the umpteenth time. A text from Michael. "Dad, why aren't you answering? Tiffany is really upset. Her parents had to wait nearly an hour at the airport. They were extremely displeased. Please call us back immediately." I just smiled. There are times when silence is more meaningful than 1,000 words. And tonight, my silence was the answer for those who had long seen me as nothing but a number in a bank account. When the truth is twisted for the public, sometimes you don't need to argue. You just need to light a bigger fire. After cutting off communication, I was enjoying an afternoon tea on the porch, reading the crime section of the local paper, the Pittsburgh Post. There was a strange sense of calm after deciding to no longer be an auto debit for Michael and Tiffany. It felt like letting go of a weight I hadn't realized was pressing down on my shoulders. "Walter, haven't seen you around much," called out Ronnie, my neighbor, from across the fence. "You doing okay?" I smiled and nodded. "Doing fine, Ronnie. Just needed some time to myself." Ronnie was one of the few neighbors who still checked on me since Mary passed. He'd occasionally invite me for a burger or just a cup of coffee on his patio. "There's a community meeting at the church tomorrow morning. You should come, Walter. Don't keep shutting yourself in," he said before leaving. I just nodded. Maybe it was time to socialize again, instead of worrying about Michael and his ungrateful family. However, my plan to attend the community meeting changed drastically the next morning. While picking up the newspaper on the porch, I found my own face on page 3 of the Pittsburgh Post. My heart seemed to stop when I read the large headline printed above my photo: "Elderly man abandons in-laws at airport in heavy rain, blamed on mental distress." My hands shook as I read the distorted article. It painted me as erratic, and even quoted Scott, Tiffany's father. "We were abandoned by my son-in-law's father, who seems to have difficulty discerning reality from personal feelings." Even more painfully, there was a quote from Tiffany: "My father has high blood pressure and nearly fainted waiting on the curb because there was no pickup. We are deeply concerned about Walter's mental state lately." I sat frozen, staring at the newspaper in my hands. How could they do this? Twist the facts and portray me as a mentally unstable old man just because I refused to be their personal driver. But I didn't throw the paper or slam the table. I just stared at the cracked kitchen counter and said softly to myself, "If you decide to play dirty in the public arena, you forget who built your house from the foundation up." I opened the old laptop. The Michael and Tiffany folder wasn't just filled with financial records. There were many other things stored there. I started downloading all their social media photos, vacations, parties, the new house. I saved screenshots of Tiffany's statuses, like the one where she wrote, "Proud to host Christmas Eve dinner this year. All thanks to hard work and my parents' blessing." Ironic, hard work, she called it, when almost everything in that house was bought with my money, including the very chairs her parents would sit in on Christmas Eve. I dug deeper, trying to find out who was behind the defamatory article. Through LinkedIn, I discovered that Scott was a member of the ethics board for the Regional Business Association and had close connections with the editor-in-chief of the Post. The article was written by a lifestyle reporter, not a social issues one. The logic was clear: Scott had steered the narrative using his personal influence. They deliberately smeared my name publicly, perhaps as a lesson for daring to refuse their request. The next morning, the effects of the article began to show. At the local deli, women started whispering as I walked by. "That's the one who left his daughter-in-law's parents at the airport. Poor man, getting old and senile. His son is so kind to still look after him, even with all that." I didn't defend myself. I just smiled. Let them talk. But at home, I started formulating a plan. Not for revenge, but to establish the truth. I organized the documents. Transfer proofs, renovation bills, mortgage payment receipts, everything highlighted. Paid in full, unasked for, saved since 5 years ago. On each page, I wrote a small note: "When love becomes a debt, a breakup makes you a criminal." I remembered Michael once telling me, "Dad, we're not financially stable yet. Help us start our new life." And without hesitation, I gave them everything I had. My retirement savings, which should have been for my own old age, I handed over to them. Not to be celebrated, but certainly not to be forgotten and trampled on like this. "Mary," I whispered to my late wife's photo. "What went wrong with our son? What went wrong with our parenting?" Over the next 2 days, I printed 14 packets of documents for the 14 guests who would be present at Michael's Christmas Eve dinner. Inside, I included all the financial proofs, visual evidence, photos and videos of Tiffany shopping while they were behind on the electric bill, verbal evidence, screenshots of WhatsApp messages, Facebook statuses, and the newspaper article with my red scrawl, "High-level lie." They want to smear my name publicly. Fine, but I will make sure the public knows the truth, too, I muttered, finishing the last packet. I picked up my old Canon camera, put in a fresh battery, and said softly to myself, "You like the stage? Let's open the curtain all the way." This plan wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect. About refusing to be the victim of slander after years of being their funding source. About showing that a simple father like me also had the right to be respected, not turned into a joke or a pity story. I compiled a master document, a chronology of assistance. Year 1 of Michael and Tiffany's marriage, monthly mortgage assistance. Year 2, kitchen, bathroom, and backyard renovation. Year 3, assistance when Michael was sick and hospitalized for 2 weeks. Year 4, grandson's birthday gift, including the college savings fund I opened in his name. Year 5, paying off Tiffany's credit card debt, which was in the tens of thousands. Everything was meticulously recorded with transfer proofs, receipts, and acknowledgement slips. No one could deny these facts. This isn't about the money, I told myself. It's about the acknowledgement that I am not the parent who abandoned his in-laws at the airport. I am the parent who has been financing the luxurious life of my son and his wife, who are now ashamed to admit it. While finalizing the packets, I idly checked Tiffany's Facebook. Her latest status made my blood boil. "Can't wait for a night full of love, delicious food, and esteemed family." Esteemed family. The people who left an old man on the curb for the sake of image. The people who smeared their own father's name in the local newspaper. We'll see who is still considered esteemed after tonight, I whispered, closing the briefcase containing the 14 document packets. I am not a man who seeks confrontation. Mary always said I was too gentle, too quick to forgive. But this time wasn't about forgiveness. It was about truth, about refusing to be the scapegoat in a story they created to cover their own irresponsibility. "Honey," I said to Mary's photo, "pray that I'm strong enough to face our own son." That night, I slept restlessly. I dreamed of little Michael running in the yard, of Mary's smile while cooking in our old kitchen, of the simple family we built with so much love. How could all that end with my name being smeared in the local paper, accused of abandoning my in-laws? I woke up early with a stronger resolve. This wasn't about revenge. This was about setting the record straight. There are nights when not all candles are blown out with a wish. Some are lit to burn away a lie that has been hidden for too long. December 24th arrived sooner than expected. All day, I double-checked the documents, ensuring nothing was missing, no detail overlooked. My stomach churned, a mix of nerves and firm determination. "Walter, where are you headed, all dressed up?" asked Mrs. Stevens, the next-door neighbor, seeing me press my best white dress shirt on the porch. "Going to see family, Mrs. Stevens," I replied simply. "Well, that's good. Don't worry too much about the paper. Everyone knows you're a good man," she said with a smile. I just nodded. Not everyone needed to know what I was about to do tonight. At 6:30 p.m., I was ready. I wore a clean shirt, black dress pants, and my old, polished loafers. No flip-flops this time. I wanted to look my best, not for them, but for myself. The small briefcase containing the 14 document files, the camera, and the copies of the article were ready. I looked at Mary's photo one last time before leaving. "Wish me luck, dear," I whispered. The drive to Michael's house felt longer than usual. I turned the radio off. I wanted silence to accompany my racing thoughts. I parked 3 houses away, deliberately not wanting my car to be immediately visible. With slow but steady steps, I walked toward the luxurious house, which I had largely paid for. From the outside, the house glowed. Christmas lights hung on the porch. A huge fir tree was visible through the window, and the sound of laughter and music drifted out. I knocked on the slightly ajar door, taking a deep breath to steady my fast-beating heart. The house was full of laughter, soft Christmas music, the smell of roasted turkey, and expensive wine as I stepped inside. The living room and dining area were packed with guests, affluent neighbors, Scott's colleagues, members of the business community, and even a lifestyle reporter I recognized as a food writer for the Post, likely a friend of Tiffany's. Tiffany was laughing freely in the center of the room, wearing an elegant red dress. Michael was talking quietly with 2 men in gray suits in a corner, nodding seriously, as if discussing important business. I walked in slowly. No one noticed my presence at first. Calmly, I placed the small briefcase on a side table in the corner. Only then did guests begin to turn my way. Some faces showed shock, some disdain, and Tiffany instantly stood up, her face pale. "Walter, this is inappropriate. This is a family event," Tiffany said in a choked voice, desperately trying to maintain her image in front of the guests. I replied, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Precisely because this is family, I came. So you'll know who paid for all of this." Michael rushed over. His face was a mix of anger and panic. He whispered urgently, "Dad, don't do this. We can discuss this another time." "We don't have another time, Mike," I replied. "Not after you decided to slander your own father in the newspaper." The guests began to whisper. Some stared at me with curiosity, while others seemed uncomfortable being in the middle of an unexpected family drama. I opened the briefcase and began handing out the documents, one by one, to the guests, with a brief statement for each person. "This is not an accusation. This is documentation. Just read it." Some guests started opening the folders and reading. Some were silent, others murmured. "Seriously, all this came from him." One guest, a middle-aged woman wearing expensive jewelry, spoke loudly, "I thought this house was inherited." Tiffany panicked, trying to explain in a trembling voice. Walter offered to help. "We never asked." I cut in calmly. "I helped because I hope to still be considered a father. But if I'm only seen as an auto debit, then it stops now." The room suddenly fell silent. Only the gentle Christmas music continued to play from the speakers in the corner. Scott, who had been silent, finally stepped forward, his face red. "What is the meaning of this? Ruining our Christmas Eve?" "No, Scott. I just want to correct the news you spread in the paper," I answered, pulling out the copy of the defamatory article. "You claimed I abandoned you at the airport due to mental distress. But you forgot to mention that for 5 years, I was the one paying the mortgage for the house where you are now sitting." Scott's wife looked shocked. You want to ruin us in front of our guests. You already started that by putting me in the paper, I countered. I'm just evening the score. Michael looked increasingly pale. He tried to pull me toward the back room. Dad, this is embarrassing. We can talk about this without an audience. Like the article in the paper. Without an audience, I asked with a bitter tone. No, Mike. If you choose a public forum to insult your father, then a public forum will also be where the truth is revealed. Scott stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. You think there won't be consequences for this? I answered calmly. There will be, but not for me. For those of you who built a reputation on the money of a parent you threw out once he ran dry. The guests began whispering again. A man I recognized as a local council member whispered loudly to his partner, I'm canceling that partnership meeting with them. The lifestyle reporter quietly took photos of the documents I had distributed. I didn't stop her. Let the truth spread as widely as the lie they had broadcast. Tiffany began to cry. Her tears ran, ruining her perfect makeup. Walter, why are you so cruel to ruin our family like this? Family? I asked, my voice trembling. When was the last time you considered me part of this family? When you needed money. When you needed a driver. You even erased my face from your family photos. I pulled out the last photo of the four of us, myself, Michael, Tiffany, and my grandson, taken 4 years ago, and then showed them their recent photos where I was absent. You ruined it first, kids. I'm just showing the world what it feels like to be thrown away when you're no longer useful. Michael looked devastated. For the first time, I saw genuine shame in his eyes. Not shame at having a father like me, but shame for what he had done. Dad, you don't need to explain anything, Mike. The evidence is clear. Scott still tried to salvage the situation, approaching some guests and whispering, perhaps trying to explain his side. But from their expressions, it was clear they no longer trusted him as they once did. One guest, an older gentleman who seemed to know Scott for a long time, stood up and approached me. Mr. Peterson, he said, extending his hand. I'm Mr. Harrison. I've known Scott for 20 years, but what I've seen tonight is disappointing. Thank you for having the courage to speak the truth. I shook his hand, moved. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Slowly, some guests began to leave. The once festive Christmas party turned into an awkward scene. Some looked at Scott and his wife with a new expression, a mix of disappointment and disbelief. I felt my task was complete. With a steady pace, I headed for the door. Michael followed, trying to stop me. Dad, don't leave like this. We have to talk. We have talked, Michael. For years, I spoke only to a wall. Now, let someone else hear my voice. As I stepped outside, I heard Tiffany's loud sobs behind me. But louder was the sound of Scott slamming a glass and yelling, I'll make sure he loses everything. I only glanced back briefly and said calmly, you just lost something much bigger. Integrity. The door closed behind me. My steps felt light as I walked back to my car. Whatever would happen tomorrow, tonight I would sleep in peace. Not because I had taken revenge, but because the truth had finally come out. In the car, I looked at Mary's photo, which I always kept in my wallet. Forgive me, dear, I whispered. This isn't what you wanted for our family. But sometimes, the truth needs to be spoken, no matter how much it hurts. All the way home, my mind replayed the faces of the guests at the party. Faces that shifted from admiration to disappointment as they learned the truth behind the glamour they witnessed. Michael's pale face, Tiffany's tears, and Scott's rage. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, only sadness that it had come to this. But, as the saying goes, you reap what you sow. Once home, I sat on the porch for a long time. The night sky, full of stars, seemed to bear witness to the life drama that had just unfolded. I took a deep breath. Good night, Mary, I whispered to the night air. Tonight, I protected our good name. I hope you understand. The next morning, I woke up with a different feeling. The weight on my chest was gone. The pent-up anger was nowhere to be found. Only a calmness and peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and for the first time since Mary passed, I truly enjoyed my morning. No pressure to wire money, no obligation to be available for their demands. I felt free. The landline rang, but I didn't answer. Today was for peace. Whatever happened after Christmas Eve could wait. Walter, there's a newspaper. Ronnie called from the fence. I took the paper he offered. On the front page, printed in bold, was the headline, "Who was truly abandoned? The story behind a father's silent aid." I smiled faintly. The truth always finds a way to come out. The fallout and the silence. 2 days after Christmas Eve, the local news was buzzing. A follow-up article by an independent journalist who had been at the party went viral online, featuring the documents, statements from several guests, and the exact financial calculations I had distributed. There were no lies in the piece, only the facts that had been hidden beneath my son's family's expensive facade. My phone rang constantly, reporters, neighbors, even some people claiming to be Michael's old college friends. I chose not to answer. Not because I was scared, but because I knew what had happened didn't need any more discussion. The truth was out, and that was enough for me. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as Scott and Tiffany's reputations crumbled. Scott was forced to step down from his association position. Catherine's charity sponsorships were pulled. Several contracts Michael had been negotiating were suddenly cancelled. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a deep sorrow that it had to end this way. For 3 months, I heard nothing from Michael or Tiffany. No calls, no texts, no visits. I didn't reach out either. Not because I didn't care, but because I was learning to let people face the consequences of the seeds they had sown. I started enjoying my new life without the burden of financing someone else's luxury. I used my remaining savings for my own needs, fixing the leaky roof, repainting the faded walls, and even starting a vegetable garden in the backyard, a hobby Mary used to love. I finally felt useful again, for myself. A son's return. Then, one morning in early March, I received a letter from the bank. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. It was a notice of default on Michael's mortgage, 3 months behind on payments. The deadline to pay the $7,700 balance was 14 days. I sat on the porch, staring into the morning sky. Michael hadn't paid the mortgage. Had his contracts been cancelled? Were their finances in trouble after the public scandal? The part of me that was still a father worried. But the part of me that had been betrayed reminded me, this is not my responsibility anymore. Several days later, I was home when a knock came at the door. I knew it would be Michael. When I opened the door, he stood there alone. His face was worn, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had lost everything. "Dad," he called out softly, his voice hoarse. "Come in, Mike," I said, stepping aside. We sat across from each other in the simple living room. "Dad," Michael began, his voice breaking. I'm sorry." Tears started to stream down his face. For the first time since he was a child, I saw my son cry like this, not a manipulative sob, but the genuine grief of someone truly broken. "I was wrong, Dad. I got caught up in the luxury lifestyle. I followed Tiffany's and my in-laws' demands too closely. I lost my way." He handed me a small folder, the letter from the bank and a proposed payment plan. "Our house is going into foreclosure, Dad. We can't afford the back payments. I've tried to get loans, but no one will help after our reputation was destroyed." "You haven't lost your father," I said finally. "You threw your father away, and now you're panicking because the people you chose left first." He was silent, crying quietly. "Where is Tiffany?" "She went back to New York with the kids. She said she couldn't handle the shame I brought on them." I smiled bitterly. "The shame I brought on them," I repeated. "Not the shame you brought on yourselves together." "She's always been that way, Dad," Michael nodded weakly. "Always blaming others. I just see it now." "So," I said at last. "What do you want from me now?" "I need financial help. I won't lie about that. But more than that, Dad, I miss you. I miss the family we used to have. Do you think money can bring all that back?" "No, Dad. But maybe it can be a new beginning. If you want to rebuild this relationship," I said, "start with your attitude, not a bill. Respect your father when you don't need him, not just when you do." He nodded, tears still flowing. "Can I come back, Dad?" he asked as he was leaving. "Maybe next weekend, we can have dinner like we used to." "Of course, Mike," I said. "This door is always open for you. But this time, come as a son, not a beggar." As he stood at the doorway, he paused and said, "Tiffany said this was all just about pride." I smiled faintly and answered, "And now, your pride isn't even enough to save the house you built with mine." A new chapter. The following Saturday, Michael came back. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just a simple polo shirt and faded jeans. He carried no folders, no bills, only a bag filled with old family photos. I had cooked his favorite pot roast and gravy. "Dad," he said, handing me one picture in particular, a photo of Mary taken just months before her diagnosis. "I always kept these photos, even when Tiffany told me to get rid of them." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked softly. I was too afraid to lose Tiffany. Too afraid of not being able to give her the luxurious life she wanted. I forgot who I really was. "And now I want to remember Mom without shame," he said firmly. "Because I know she wouldn't be proud of the man I was." We sat in quiet companionship. He talked about his new simple life, living in a small apartment near his new job at a small construction firm. He talked about wanting to live a simple, meaningful life, just like you and Mom taught me. "If you want to start over, Mike," I told him, "start by respecting yourself first. Don't repeat these mistakes with your own children." "I won't, Dad. I want to be a better person. Not for Tiffany, but for myself, and for you." Before he left, he asked, "Can I come again next week?" "Always, Mike. This house is always your home." A few days later, I was talking to Rose, Mary's cousin, who lived a few hours away. "He's starting over," I told her. "The house will be foreclosed. His wife is gone. His job is a mess." "Are you going to help him again, Walter?" Rose asked. "I don't know, Rose. Part of me wants to. He is my son. But the other part of me feels this is a lesson he needs to face alone." "You must do what feels right, Walter," Rose said wisely. "But remember, helping doesn't always mean giving money. Sometimes, letting a person face the consequences of their actions is the biggest help of all." I took Rose's words to heart. I continued to work on my house, volunteer in the community, and spend time with Rose's family, who always welcomed me without judgment. They saw me as Aki, Grandpa, and their simple affection filled the void left by Michael. One evening, Michael texted, "Dad, I got a big project at work. The pay is decent. Can I take you out to lunch to celebrate?" I smiled. Not because of the pay, but because he wanted to invite me to celebrate, not to ask for help. "Of course, Mike. Your father looks forward to it." That night, I sat on the back porch, looking at the old apple tree Mary planted. "Dear," I whispered, "our son is learning to grow again, like a new shoot on an old tree. He had to take the long, painful road to get here, but the important thing is, he's coming back." In my living room now stand two framed photos. One of my late wife, smiling warmly. The other, of me sitting with Rose's family, all of us laughing. Two photos representing two phases of my life, a past full of love, and a present full of hope. As I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, family isn't about blood. It's about who still sets a chair for you at the table, even when you bring nothing but sincerity.